Hi everyone, good morning. So, welcome. Thank you for being here at 8 in the morning on a Saturday. Okay, JP. Just this. So, let's start. This is just going to be a talk about solution architecture in general, how we do things within EPAM, certain opportunities to grow, and your learning path and what opportunities you have to explore things and to learn and grow specifically within technology. So here's a brief agenda of things. So we pretty much do a small enough introduction. I think JP has already done that. We go through an overview of the architecture practice in general. We look at solution architecture in specific in terms of how we do things at EPAM, the different roles for a solution architect. Look at all the career opportunities here in Colombia as well as global opportunities. And then all the learning and personal growth items as well. And then we will have a QA session. So I don't speak Spanish, so it should primarily be in English. But also, at the end of each of these sections, we can probably have a small QA just to clarify things in terms of if you have any questions and doubts. So let us move on. So this is a brief introduction about me. JP has already done that. I have around 16 years of experience. I've been with EPAM for the past 3 years. I've spent most of my career working on data and data-related things. Started as a ETL developer. I mean, there was no data engineer kind of roles at that time. It was an ETL developer. Slowly moved on from there. I was working on data warehousing, business intelligence, and stuff like that. Moved over to big data, cloud, data analytics, and now I pretty much look at everything related to data and solution architecture on big data and cloud. So, moving on. So here's an overview of the solution architecture practice as a whole. As I mentioned, it's a big group of architects. I mean, this is one of the very few companies where I've seen these many number of architects. So as you see here, there are 1,000 plus architects who are specifically looking at architecture. Now, this role doesn't come with all the additional baggage of set delivery and all of that stuff. So we are specifically looking at architecture and architecture only. So this is just an overview of the global presence. Around 100 in APAC, 270 plus in Central and Eastern Europe, 180 plus in CIS, 160 plus in Western Europe. But then we have around 250 right now in Americas. That includes the whole of North America and Latin America. Around 150 in US. But then we have a small group of budding architects here in Colombia, around 20 plus. And we hope that this number can grow exponentially in the coming year. So moving on, I did mention we only look at architecture and all of that stuff. So how do you network with other architects? How do you grow your skills and stuff like that, right? So there are certain specialty groups within the architecture practice. So the first one we call as GSAT, or Global Solution Architecture Team. The second is a Technology Excellence Initiative. And the third is a small community that we are now growing, which is specifically catering to architects within Americas. So what do each of these groups offer you, right? So GSAT. Now, participation to GSAT is proactive. You only participate if you are interested in taking up additional activities on top of your project work, right? So this, as you see here, is a group of proactive architects. We'll look at what we do as part of GSAT. Now, DEI, you see something called as a B track that is mentioned here. So the way things are done in EPAM is you have A track and a B track. Now, A track covers all sorts of engineers who are working on code on a daily basis. So these are people who are aimed at who pretty much look at delivery and stuff like that, all excellent engineers. But B track is for people who are not involved in day-to-day delivery or coding activities. So this covers solution architects, your project managers, product managers, account directors, business analysts, program managers. So this is pretty much what happens with B track. So this community is pretty much geared towards bringing all of these people together in terms of all the latest trends that are happening, so that we have a unified view of the latest trends for all the we track associates. So that is pretty much the goal of TEI. And then, as we mentioned, we have a small close-knit community of architects within the Americas. So let us just take a closer look at what each of these groups does. GSAT is like one of my favorite groups. So the way things work is we bring in all architects. I think it's around 400 or 500 members strong as of today. Now, this has people from across the globe. Now, the big thing here is most of you might have like worked with clients locally or in specific geographies. But if you look at clients or customers across different geographies, their mindset is pretty different, even though they want to like build the same thing, but the way how you reach there or their technology vision is pretty different. So it's very interesting to look at the different perspectives from different geographies in terms of how businesses look at implementing things, as well as how people who are working in technology, like architects, look at how to implement things. So you get to mingle and work and network with most of these architects across different geographies. So that is one. So as you see here, it's global activities and people come from all over the world. But then the other thing is, what we want to do as part of this group is look at all the new trends that are coming up. How does the company align to those new trends? What are the things that we need? Do we need to like build some best practices or blueprints for newer technology adoption and stuff like that? We also look at what is the best that we can do in terms of technology vision for the company as a whole. Now, one of the most recent activities that I was involved with as part of this group is to look at the overall end-to-end architecture implementation, right, as a practice. Things have changed a lot. I mean, people have moved on from a waterfall way of doing things to agile, and now it's more scaled agile, and we need to like adapt very quickly to changing things. So we are like working on revamping the whole way architecture is done within EPAM. So that is one of the things that we are working on as well. Now, what are the and also how do we implement these things? You see something called as work groups in here. So typically what happens is when you're part of this group, you get opportunities for pre-sales and production engagement and stuff like that. If there are new opportunities that are coming up, when they are looking for any specific, say, technical skills or domain skills and stuff like that, they send out a note and then you can participate based on your interest. But also, there are certain work group opportunities that come up. As I mentioned, we work on blueprints, we work on best practices, we work on like revamping like the whole technology vision and roadmap for the company and all of that stuff. So whenever these workshops come in, so you can be part of those work groups. There are people from across the world, so you can bring in your perspective, everyone brings in their perspective, and then it's pretty much like a workshop where we come up with all of these artifacts that are used within the company. So that's about the work groups. So what is this, like, what is the benefit of being part of this group, right? So as I mentioned, yes, there are global activities, work groups and tech talks and stuff like that. There are a lot of pre-sales and production opportunities that you get, but probably the most important are these three, right? You can network with a bunch of solution architects, people who speak your language in terms of technology and passion towards technology and how to do things. Visibility to EPAM top management, because this is the group that pretty much sets the standard in terms of what EPAM does. I mean, at the core, EPAM is a very engineering-oriented community, right? So whenever we come up with these practices, we are pretty much setting the standard for how things are done within this company. So obviously, you have a lot of visibility to the top management. And then, what you see here as SAU or TSU, we used to call it Solution Architecture University, or now it's called Technology Solutions University. So there are a lot of educational programs that are geared towards solution architecture, how to grow from an engineer all the way to like a principal architect kind of a role. And there are specific roles or specific courses that are available for each of these roles. So there will be a priority for joining and participating in these educational programs as part of this group as well. So we will look at these groups in detail in terms of what we offer from SAU or TSU perspective. So there are some slides where we get into more detail within this. So any questions around this group? Because I mean, if there's any architect in here who's going to join us, I pretty much expect them to be part of this group because this is the most interesting group that we have. Any questions on this? Yes.
I don't understand very clearly what does it mean pre-sales opportunities.
Okay, so pre-sales opportunities, right? So whenever, are you aware of terminologies like RFPs and RFIs and stuff like that? So when we work with new customers, say when a new customer comes in, the way things happen is they have a request for proposal kind of thing. So you have cases where you get a problem statement for them, and then we go back and then look at all the questions and then go back with our recommendation in terms of what we need to do for that particular implementation. Now there are also cases where people ask us to come and present in terms of what we offer as a company, what is the competency, what kind of technology initiatives that we can bring in, and how we can help them. Now, those are all pre-sales opportunities. There are also cases where you have cases like architecture assessments and stuff like that. Now, these are not full-fledged production implementations for a particular client, but things which are pretty much pre-engagement. So where you work with, say, people from AR, business development and those kind of people. So you work with them and then you go ahead and then present things that are good about your company so that you can win that particular project. So those are pre-sale opportunities. And as a solution architect, a lot of these opportunities pop up. So along with working on, say, end-to-end implementation for your current project, you can also be part of a lot of these pre-sales opportunities. I mean, that's very interesting because you get to explore a lot of different domains, different technologies, different platforms and stuff like that. And these are very short engagements. Sometimes few days, sometimes few weeks. So it's very interesting on that aspect. Anything else? Okay, moving on. This is the second group that we looked at, TEI. As I mentioned, it's pretty much a community that brings together a lot of the lead track folks, product managers and delivery managers, technology consultants, architects, and all of these people. Now the reason for this is you have these people who are only looking at, say, product management, people who are looking at only delivery aspects, people who specialize in specific technologies, but they may not be generalists, right? They may not have a wide expertise across different domains. And then architects. So the idea behind this is to bring in all the latest trends that are happening within the industry and make sure that these people are aware of how we want to approach those things. Now, how is this done? There are weekly webinars, open discussions, roundtables and stuff like that. There are also cases where people can go in and present things that they worked on in terms of their project. So a lot of architects do take part in that. So we talk about how we implemented certain things or how we overcame certain challenges for a particular implementation, or if there are any new trends within that particular technology landscape, then we talk about that, make sure that everyone is aware of the new things that are coming in. So that's pretty much how we do this particular group and what it's used for. So moving on, now this is another interesting group. So if any one of you joins us, you'll also be automatically part of this particular group. Now, what does this particular group do? We do a bunch of meetings. It's more of tech talks and stuff like that. This happens every alternate Fridays. So we bring in solution architects across Americas, people from Canada, USA, and all of Central and Latin America. So we talk about all the technology stuff, yes, but then we also look at certain pre-SA assessment sessions. Now, you may ask me, what is assessment? Unlike most of the companies where you have a regular appraisal cycle and then a fixed quota of promotions that happen on a yearly or a 6-monthly basis, right? The way we do things at EPAM is When you are ready to move up to the next level, you go and apply for an assessment. So you decide whether you are ready to move on to the next level. So there is no restriction in terms of waiting for a particular time of the year or a cycle, and depending on someone who you may not be in touch with on a daily basis to determine whether you are ready to grow or not, right? So it's everything in your hands. So we'll talk about how assessment works, but then within this group, we also train people for these assessment sessions. So we do like mock assessments. We also talk about what are the requirements and how to approach a particular assessment session. So a typical assessment session is very similar to an RFP that, as I mentioned. So depending on your role, it can either be a problem statement or a use case that is given to you. You go back with your questions, they respond back to your questions, and then you have probably like 24 hours to build your architecture for that particular problem statement. And then you have a committee of experts, 3 to 5 architects, and then you pretty much have a debate on your architecture, right? So you go ahead, present your architecture, they ask you questions as to why you did certain things, and what is the pros and cons of that particular way of doing things, and then they may also ask questions around what happens if I change this requirement? How do you approach this? So they are pretty much looking at your architecture capability as a whole, and also your soft skills, presentation skills, how you handle certain questions, how you handle things when you are under pressure, when people are changing requirements, and then how do you react to it, right? So all of these things are looked at because on a day-to-day basis, as an architect, this is what you are doing with your customers as well. So we pretty much look at those aspects, and then at the end of the assessment, the committee gives a recommendation whether you are like ready to move up to the next level or not. So that's how things work. And this is totally in your control. When you decide that, yes, I'm ready to go to the next level, you go ahead and then submit a request for assessment, and you go ahead and then fill all of your forms. Your resource manager looks at that, and then based on your discussion with him, if both of you agree that, yes, you are ready to step up, then you go through the assessment cycle. So that's how things work. Now, we also have some sessions where we look at building reusable assets, pretty much blueprints, best practices, and also talk about some accelerators and other things that the company builds as well. Now, there are solution architects are not part of any competency center. When I say competency center, you have people who are specifically working on a particular technology. Like cloud practice may be a competency center, but within cloud practice, if someone is, say, working on search optimization, right? All types of search implementations, yes, then that is a separate competency. If someone is working on AI and ML, that's a specific competency. So for those competencies, they can also build accelerators and stuff like that, or value creators that can speed up things in terms of your implementation. And as an architect, it is very important to know what every competency is doing and what tools we have on offer to do our job better or to simplify things and make it like way faster, right? So we talk about those things. Then there's something called architectural katas. So this is pretty much geared towards training an engineer to think like an architect. So there are specific sessions that happen trying to replicate an assessment process kind of a thing. Again, we will talk about these things in detail. We have specific slides that cover how we do the architectural katas, and then we also have some town halls. So, what are we trying to achieve out of this, right? One of the things is rotation plans. So, we at EPAM believe that whenever you start working on a particular implementation, your learning curve pretty much is like it goes straight up like an exponential curve. You learn a lot, but after some time you hit a plateau, right? Most implementations, it comes around 6 to 8 months, where you have set up the initial architecture, everything's working smooth, you have multiple teams working on delivery and implementation, but then you may start getting bored. You may not learn on a day-to-day basis. Yes, there are other non-project initiatives, GSAT, pre-sales, and other things for you to learn, but then we also encourage or recommend architects to actively seek for other implementations so that you can rotate out of those particular projects that you are working on and then move on to the next implementation. So this way, you are not stuck at a particular account, so you don't stagnate there. So we encourage people to move on, keep learning on a day-to-day basis. So that is the rotation plans. And within this group, I mean, because it's a smaller group that is specifically geared towards architects and Americas, we look at rotation plans for them. We already looked at PSA assessment sessions, reusable assets, so we spoke about that. We also spoke about pre-sale opportunities. So there are a lot of that come up here, along with GSAT as well. So these are specifically opportunities that are in America, so we can look at that. And then obviously we have certain resident account architects. Now these are architects who are associated with a particular account or a client, and they are pretty much looking at the overall growth of EPAM within that particular account. So those are resident account architects. And then we also offer something called as ad hoc mentoring and budding programs. Now, when someone joins the company, right, as a new joinee, we want that person to be very comfortable, learn how we do things at EPAM and stuff like that. So what happens is we pair that person with a senior associate within the group so that they can, one, learn about how the company works, but then two, also learn about how we do architecture within this company and then all the different initiatives. So pretty much this person is tagged along with you for the initial few months, make you, like, help you settle and stuff like that. And then there's ad hoc mentoring. Like if you want to work with someone, we can also like provide them as a mentor. There's an organization-wide mentoring program, which is very interesting. We'll talk about that later as well. So pretty much these are the initiatives for that group. So we spoke about all the three different groups that are available. So let me know if there are any specific questions or doubts around these before we move on to the actual SA role within EPAM and all the different levels of solution architects. Any questions? Yes, please.
Is any of these groups industry segmented or?
Actually, no, they are all technology oriented. So you can be an expert in a particular domain or industry, but these are looking at specific technology oriented things. Now, that doesn't mean that as part of these groups, one of my domain expertise is viewership analytics and stuff like that in media and entertainment group. I now work with healthcare and life sciences customer. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't look at anything specifically to that domain. Like one of the new trends within healthcare and life sciences is called HL75 in terms of how data exchange happens between different products or entities. Now that's an industry standard that's being adopted widely. So that means we also go look at how technology or our implementation has to change to cater to these new initiatives or new regulations that clients are looking at. So we do look at specific industry aspects as well, but the group as a whole is not geared towards a particular domain. It's more of like domain agnostic, technology driven things. Sorry. So moving on, I mentioned we have 1,000+ architects and stuff like that, but everyone can't be on the same level. Now, what we see here is 6 different levels. This is called a software architect. We have a SA1, SA2, SA3, SA4, SA5. This is also called a solution architect 1, a solution architect 2, a senior solution architect, a lead solution architect, or a director in technology, a principal architect, or a senior director of technology. So we'll talk about each of these roles, but before that, what you see here is the technical breadth and the depth in terms of specialization. So the longer the bar, we are looking at more in-depth specialization in a particular topic. The wider the bar, as in here, we are looking at wider expertise with like different frameworks and platforms and stuff like that, but not very deep in terms of specialization within this, right? So how do these 6 roles differ? The first role that we have is a software architect. What you see here is a lot of technical specialization, a bit of architectural excellence. So the way I put this role is, if you are transitioning from an engineer to a solution architect, so specifically from a lead engineer to a solution architect, So this is the particular role that you are looking at. This role was introduced, I think, sometime last year, because in one of our GSAT meetings, we were debating about the gap between a lead engineer and the solution architect one. So we felt that gap or the jump is pretty big. So we wanted to make things smoother for an engineer to move into an architect role. So we went ahead and introduced this software architect role. I think it's being rebranded as an associate solution architect probably in the next few weeks. So what we expect from this role is, because it comes from a lead engineer, someone who has like very good in-depth knowledge in a particular technology, but may not have cross-technical platform expertise. And they should also know a little bit about architectural basics and stuff like that. So that is pretty much this role. They should also be able to work directly with customers, because we see a lot of engineers who are like extreme techies. They can like sit behind a screen and do like wonders, but then improving their soft skills, presentation skills, working with the customer, how to handle political aspects when you're working with customers and stuff like that. Those are things that they have to learn, and that is where we start training them to start thinking like an architect. Solution Architect 1, yes, you still have the same expertise in terms of technology. You may be an expert in one platform. You should also now learn a lot about different architectural patterns and stuff like that. You may not be expert in that, but then you should be aware of the different architectural patterns. SA2, again, a lot of technical expertise, but not just one particular technology or one platform. You should be an expert in more than one technology. You should be able to work on like cross-technical aspects, cross-platforms, cross-domains and stuff like that. A lot of architectural excellence, meaning that you should have wide expertise or knowledge across different architectural platforms, patterns, frameworks and stuff like that. But it also brings in some sort of a business focus. That means you are probably an expert in a particular domain who understand how things work from a business or a functional perspective. Now, the big difference between these two roles is you have this architect who's very good with technology, knows a lot about architecture, knows probably one domain and is almost an expert in that. But here, we look at people who can work on multiple architectures, like different platforms and things like that. But also people who can understand how the business works, what are the challenges for business, a lot of functional aspects. So moving on from a pure technical focus to a techno-functional focus kind of a thing when we are looking at a SA2. Moving on to an SA3, yes, everything that applies to SA2 applies here as well, but then you are expected to know like more than one platform, multiple architectural patterns, frameworks. You should be able to debate and explain things to your customer as to why a particular way of doing your architecture is better for that particular implementation. You should have wide expertise in business areas, multiple domains, and then what you see here as EA focus, which is basically enterprise architecture. You're also bringing in a bit of enterprise strategy, technology, roadmap, and stuff like that to your customers. So you are able to go there, look at their whole landscape, bring in some technology vision, strategy, and then build a roadmap for them. Right? Moving on to an SA4, now this is where things get really interesting. So as you see, obviously wide expertise with technology, but then more than specific skills in technology, we are looking at architecture excellence, right? You should be an expert in different architectural patterns, the new trends that are coming in. So pretty much imagine that you are working with people who are mentors or evangelists in terms of particular domains. But also, I did mention that this role can also mean a director technology. Now that is geared towards people who also want to build a group of people around them who specialize in a particular technology. So that is what I call as a competency center. So you may have some of these people who are not just looking at their customer work and building architectures and stuff like that, but also looking at building competency centers within EPAM. Now, SA5, Now, these are what we call as world-class architects. People who are literally in the league where they can go ahead and then lead strategic engagements. They can talk to people, high-level executives, C-level executives, and also work as consultants for them, right, in terms of defining the entire technology vision, roadmap, governance, anything that needs to be done in terms of an end-to-end digital transformation for that particular customer. Now, these are SA5s. They can be principal architects, or they can also be senior architects. They can also be senior director of technology. So there's another slide where we look at things a little bit more in detail. So as I mentioned here, a software architect is an entry-level architect transitioning from a lead engineer, needs to know a little bit of technology, architecture basics, but an expert in at least one technical platform. An SA1, same things, but now you are working as a true architect in this case. Along with different architectural patterns and all of that stuff, you should also have a hold of, like a strong hold of architecture frameworks, but you should also be aware of specific project management practices. These days, we expect everyone to be familiar with agile management, scaled agile, and all of these practices because you're working with product managers, you're working with account managers, delivery managers, and you are like a key part of all of that delivery process. So you should be aware of that as well. Now, moving on to an SA2, we did discuss about these things, but then here's where things get a bit interesting. Architecture assessments, as I mentioned. One of my own personal experiences, we were brought in for architecture assessment. We went there 6 to 8 week assessment. We did their like entire platform assessment, and we went back with the recommendations, and that finally turned out into a 15-month project, and it's still continuing, right? So these are opportunities that come up along with your current project work, so you can do that, or you can be onboarded to be a full-time part of a particular assessment, but these usually last for like 6, 8, or 10 to 12 weeks. You should also be able to build a technology roadmap for your customer, but you should also have a lot of business and domain expertise, like trying to understand how the business works. Now, as I mentioned, I currently work in healthcare and life sciences. I'm still learning the domain, even though I've been there for like 3 years now, because to learn the domain in and out, it takes a lot of time. But I have spent like around 6 to 7 years working on media, entertainment, advertising kind of a thing. So I can like consider myself an expert in that, but not in, say, retail or insurance or those kind of things, right? So this is where we look at architects trying to have in-depth expertise around a particular domain. Now, moving on to SA3s, again, we spoke about multiple architectures and all of that stuff, but then these are people who can go ahead and then build blueprints, white papers. We spoke about pre-sales artifacts. Now, here we are working on pre-sales, but then we are looking at using existing pre-sale artifacts. But these are people who can go ahead and then even build the new pre-sale artifacts, build new platforms in terms of like new best practices and those kind of things. People should also be aware of a lot of technology governance and strategy, and should also be able to drive the roadmap for a particular client. Now, SA4, this is where the architects can go in and then look into long-term strategy and architecture, but also work in an advisory or a leadership role for a particular client. They should be able to address technology to political issues. Now, this is a very interesting case. There are a lot of times when you know that for a particular solution or for a particular problem statement, you may have the best solution built in terms of selecting the best products that are to be used, but then you may have a pushback in terms of the company being a partner with a particular vendor or a particular product, and then how do you mitigate those kind of issues? Again, we spoke about technology governance, strategy, and all of that stuff, and these are people who are into mentoring or evangelism kind of roles. They can go ahead and then talk about a particular product or a platform or a framework, and then go ahead and then spread that across the world. You will also meet some of our SA4 people, if you stay longer today, there are some interesting sessions as well. And again, SA5, this is where we looked at people who can like lead strategic engagements, play the role of CTO or CIO, and again, be a consultant for high-level or C-level executives, and again, world-class architects in here. So these are pretty much the roles that we are looking at. Now, what we see here is a growth path all the way from a lead engineer to this kind of a role. Now, a lot of companies that I have seen is your growth plan is kind of limited in a sense that after a certain amount of growth with technology, like working on engineering aspects, then they look at, okay, if you have certain amount of experience working as an engineer, now you are considered as an architect. If you have certain years of experience as an architect, then if you want to grow further, the only way that is available for you is kind of move into people management. That is what I have seen, I have experienced, and I have also moved on from those kind of roles. But what you see here is a path that can take you from like an engineer all the way to a principal architect without having to go specifically into people management and just concentrating on technology. So this is something that I really love about the company as well. So any questions around these roles? Like anything in terms of like what each of these roles do? So just let me know, we can discuss about that.
Yes, I would like to ask you
Sure.
about the evolution process. Is it highly linear or maybe
Okay.
in the sense of getting jobs? Say,
Actually, you can jump, right?
you find someone in SA1
Yes, you
who
can.
shows to be a great guy,
Yes,
marvelous, and
Yes.
you jump, say, to SA3.
you can actually jump. So as I mentioned, yes, as I mentioned,
That's very attractive.
yes, as I mentioned, right, the assessment model. Now, the assessment, so we spoke about assessments. Now, assume that, like, my current role is SA2. Now, I already do a lot of the stuff that is here and a bit of this. Now, it's up to me to decide if I want to go to SA3 and take up that assessment, or if I can go to SA4. Now, the way to do that is, first you have a discussion with your resource manager, like your immediate manager, right? So when both of you agree that, yes, you are already playing a role that is way above your current title, right? And you meet the requirements for this particular role, then yes, both of you agree that, yes, you're going to apply for this particular role, which means you are skipping a role. Now, it's allowed. It's not like you have to go one step at a time, spend 3 years here, 3 years here, 3 years here. That's not the case. When you feel you are ready for this, yes, you can skip. But again, the assessment happens looking at both of these and whether you are ready for this particular role. So if you are ready for that role, yes, you are part of that role. So that's how it works. Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to ask if to take the assessment for the AC1, you have to be a lead, previously a lead taker or just be a lead?
So I mentioned track A and track B. So track A is all engineers. So you have A1, A2, A3, A4. So you have to be A4 and then you transition over to B1, which is this. Now, we were having people moving from lead engineer role directly to this, and we saw like a big change. Like adoption was pretty difficult for them. So that's why this role was brought in. Now, it's not just an assessment. Yes, there is an assessment, but you can directly apply for this without an assessment after passing certain courses. Now, we will look at that whole growth plan in terms of how you move from an engineer role to this, and then also all the courses that are available for you to grow into each of these roles. Because the roles and responsibilities are different, and you can learn things on the job, but then you should also know certain other things. Now, those are the courses that come into picture, and then we have a big slide talking about every role and courses that are specifically geared towards helping you achieve each of the roles and the responsibilities for that. So we'll look into that. Anything else? Okay, awesome. Okay, so again, just an overview of the number of people within the community. So this is global numbers. As I mentioned, software architect was a pretty new role, so the numbers are pretty low right now. But then in a year or two, you may see a much bigger number here. This is the number of SA1s, SA2, SA3, SA4, SA5. I'll try to skip through some of these things faster because just of time constraints. But these are the numbers within Americas. So we have around 6 SA5s and 50 SA2s, 20 plus SAs, and I believe a major chunk of these 20 are right here in Colombia. So we looked at SA role. There are a lot of other architect titles as well within EPAM based on your specialization. So here we looked at solution architect. If you are like an expert in data, so you're a data solution architect, enterprise architecture, and all of that stuff. So these are the other titles. So there are other talks that are like scheduled for today where we look at some of these in detail. But I would want to focus here, right? So you have technology focus here, you have strategy focus here. Someone who's like a technology architect or a lead engineer has a lot of technology focus. Someone who's an enterprise architect has a lot of strategy-based focus, not a lot of technology focus. Now, where does the solution architect come in, right? Solution architecture is kind of like the middle ground between everything. You have business focus, you have customer focus, you look into strategy, you look also into technology, right? Right in the middle of everything, a mixture of a lot of roles, a mixture of a lot of these roles. Now, as a solution architect, do I look into all of these things? Yes, I look into all of these things. Because I'm closely aligned with a particular customer, with that particular implementation. Any new work that comes up, any new challenge that comes up, I am on that. Now, is there like a data platform that needs to be built? Yes, I'm on that. But when I'm finally implementing that particular project, I bring in a data solution architect who is an expert in that. They look at day-to-day implementation of that particular engagement, which focuses specifically on data. But I'm still looking at the overall architecture for the client. So that's how a solution architect is different from someone who is more of a specialty-based architect. So, any questions on this? In terms of where we see a solution architect as against all the other architects. Okay, moving on. So we did discuss about some of the things that an architect does. So these are few of the ways an architect can be engaged in a particular implementation, right? You can be part of the architecture assessments for that particular project or the client. You can be in an advisory role for that implementation. You can be part of the pre-sale support. Or you can be the in-house architect, you are working on architecture design. You can just be part of an architecture review for a particular implementation. We also have a thing called engineering excellence and stuff like that, where you can bring in an expert group who come in, look at how things are built, whether that adheres to the standards of EPAM, and then certify that, yes, this particular architecture or implementation adheres to our engineering excellence initiative, right? A certain set of guidelines in terms of how we build things. So you can be part of that, or you can be part of the overall implementation review as well. So on a day-to-day basis, as an architect, you have all of these in terms of different roles or opportunities that are available to you, and you can be part of anything based on your interest. You can be working on a particular project and you still want to like do something different from that. You can then take up an advisory role for a different account, right? So you are not in-house, but you are still there as an advisory role for that. So a lot of opportunities in terms of varying aspects of work that you can get into. Okay, so any questions there before we move on to career opportunities and learning? And probably need to go a bit faster as well. Any questions? Okay, so moving on. I mean, JP mentioned about our global presence and stuff like that, and I also spoke about GSAT, where you have architects throughout the globe. But the thing, or the main focus of this slide is, you are here in Colombia. That doesn't mean that your opportunities are limited to customers or implementations that are specific to Colombia. Now, in my own current project, I have people from Canada, I have people from Mexico, I have people from Eastern Europe, I have people from India, I have people from Central Europe. So you can be in Colombia and be part of any of the global implementations. So it doesn't matter where you are, as long as, so we pretty much have agreements with the clients in terms of the specific geographies where we can have people and you can be part of that. So it just doesn't limit your opportunities to clients or customers who are based in Colombia. So I did mention about essay rotation. So yes, there is essay rotation. We actively encourage people to seek newer projects after a certain amount of time spent in a particular project. You can also work on discovery phases for some projects, pre-sales and stuff like that here, and some discovery, like whenever you go in to a new implementation, like to a new client, you can go ahead and then work on a particular discovery phase initially, and then set things straight, and then bring in the experts or the actual implementation team. So you can be part of that as well. And then again, so there is another thing here called relocations. Now, there are a lot of relocation opportunities. A lot of people that you speak today are people who have relocated from one geography to another geography within EPAM. So there are a lot of opportunities as well in terms of relocations. So you can go to a new geography, work on like different customers, and be part of a different lifestyle as well. Now, here's the most interesting part. So yeah, you did ask me how you move from one role to another role, right? So now, once you become a solution architect, we saw 5 different roles, SA1 to SA5. Now, for each of these roles, we saw certain responsibilities or certain things the architect has to be familiar with. Now, yes, the architect can learn things on the job, but then what are we doing to make sure that the architect learns certain best practices, certain new frameworks and things like that that are available within the industry, right? So SA1, you have certain courses, and at the end of this, you can go ahead and then be part of a certification. Same thing for SA2. Here we have Enterprise Architecture Basics, CDMP Associate. This was not there when I was working on these courses, because this is Safe Architect. In the last 1 to 2 years, I have seen like a lot of push from a lot of customers towards Scaled Agile. So now we have a course specifically geared towards Safe Architects so that they are familiar with the process. Now, how does this whole TSU or a Solution Architect University run? Okay? So you have requests to be part of this university every 6 months. So if you are SA1, you are expected to finish these courses. So every 6 months, an opportunity opens up, you go ahead and register. So you work on this, which is a mandatory, mandatory course for all SA1s, which is architecture design. You get certified by SEI. And then for the next 6 months, you have an opportunity to work on a certification, technical certification of your choice. Same with SA2, TOGAF EA Basics. So 6 months here, 6 months here, 6 months here, and then you have certification. Now you move on to SA3. Now, we looked at SA4 and SA5 being part of digital transformation for a particular client. So how do you prepare someone for that, right? So you train them before they move on to that next role. So yes, you have digital transformation here, processes and stuff like that. And then you have certification of your choice. Now there is a particular budget allocated for each architect every quarter. So you can go ahead and then choose the roles that you want in terms of the courses that you are working on. And then again, you have a free choice in terms of selecting a technology that you want to work with and then get certified on that. Now this is in terms of what is available for a solution architect. We did look at other architect roles within the company. So what is available for them, right? Now if you are working on security, yes, you have the same path with different courses geared specifically for security architecture. Same for QA, and then you have advanced software engineering, and then you have technology consulting, right? So similar kind of courses for them as well, for each of these roles, so that you can go ahead and then train a particular architect to move from one level to another level, and then like be very familiar in terms of having the right skills for that particular role. So, any questions around this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, one linearity.
Okay.
Let's say someone is SE2.
Okay.
Mine, that someone take a course for, say, is it 4 level?
Actually, no. No. But the thing is, when you come into the company, say you come in as SA3, what we ask you to do is learn everything from scratch because we want every architect in the company to be familiar with all the concepts.
Right.
Now, but if based on your particular role, there is a need to know certain things. Now, you may be an SA2, but you are working on a role that needs you to be very aware of digital transformation.
Okay.
Then you can go talk to your resource manager, you can talk to TSU, and then provide a justification to your case as to why you want to skip this and then move on to this. If your justification can convince them, then yes, you can go there.
Oh, okay.
So that's how it works. So the default path is you go linear, even if you are at a higher role and then you come in. But based on need, you can go ahead and then push your case and justify as to why you need to be there, and that can happen. I mean, my own experience, I joined as SA2 and I was working a lot on enterprise architecture. So the first course that I took up was this, after skipping this. So yes, those things can happen if you can justify your case. So go through an assessment after finishing all of these things. Now you are an architect, this whole thing opens up. So we have TMP, we spoke about GSAT, we spoke about TSU, and there's another thing that is like an optional thing where you can join this particular group and then learn about interpersonal effectiveness and stuff like that. Just a bunch of courses. So any questions on this, like the path from an engineer to an architect, and what happens after you become an architect? Questions? Okay, moving on. Okay, I think so. We are done. Any overall questions? No? Yes.
So, how did you define an architecture? When you speak about architecture, you are talking about a solution for a problem, particular problem.
Yes.
How could you give a broad definition of architecture?
Can someone get a mic there?
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, an architecture, as I understand it, is a solution or an IT solution for an enterprise that has a client that has some problem. So, what I mean, I haven't worked with architectures before, so that's why I'm asking. So, how could you define in terms of what parts, what composes an architecture in general sense?
Obviously, solving problems, but not just technical implementation problems. Now, there can be a lot of different challenges as well. Now, one of my current roles is working as a group architect. Now, I have 18 or 20 different teams, 7 architects who handle those different teams. Now, at my role, I'm not involved on a day-to-day implementation of a particular project. Now, if there is a problem of, we have some issues with performance and all of that stuff, our engineers and the in-house architects for that particular project work on that. But where I come in is looking at, we have a search implementation across different teams. Now, do we have a similar implementation across everything, like a standard unified implementation, or are they working in silos, right? Different kinds of implementation. Now, again, based on your role, you can be working on a specific solution. Okay, this is my problem, I want to solve this problem, right? That's a pure technical problem solving. Now, depending on your role, you can also be like, okay, I have a bigger problem because I have different things that need to be done, but then people work on their own. There are different ways these things are done, nothing is standardized. There is no specific way to deploy things. There's no specific template that anyone uses. Now, that is a different kind of a challenge to solve. Now, the third thing is, yes, you can build something on AWS, you can build something on GCP, you can build something on Azure. Now, what is the best thing for that particular client, right? And what are the pros and cons of that kind of implementation? Now, that's a different challenge to solve. And another one is, do we want to build things on-prem? Do we want to build things on cloud? Does it have to be hybrid? How do we look at data security? How do we look at network security? Now, that's a totally different challenge to me. Now, depending on your role as an architect, you have different kinds of problems to solve as you evolve. So, did I answer your question? Anything else? Yes.
I understand that for getting to higher role,
Yep.
you need a self-assessment. But is that self-assessment also dependent on job openings?
No, it's not dependent on job opening. So assume that you decide that you can go to the next level, you apply for an assessment, and then you move to the next level, and then we will start looking for roles that are specific to you. I mean, the company is growing in crazy terms. You can go and look at how things have grown. JP showed 62,000 or something. I have been in this company less than 3 years. When I joined, it was like 30,000. So the number of roles that are opening up is a case where we always have a shortage of people than shortage of roles. That's the problem that we have right now. Anything else? So thank you, everyone. Yeah.
You said that you can follow like the path when you are an engineer, and you can move, go in management or
Yes.
go like a solution architect. But I think that also you need management and some skills in architecture, right?
Yes, there are management kind of skills, as I mentioned. Like you want to be a mentor. Yes, you are managing, you are guiding someone in terms of how to handle things. You are a solution architect. You are working with different roles, so you need to manage that as well. And if you are still interested in people management aspect, you can still have a bunch of junior architects tag team. You can manage them, you can train them, you can be part of their group. So you can still have that, but then you don't have like specific people management responsibilities only. And this is just based on your interest. In my previous role, I was juggling architecture as well as people management. I had 65 people in my group that I was leading. In my current role, I just want to concentrate on architecture, so I don't have anyone reporting to me, right? It's based on your choice in terms of how you want to handle things. So, can I answer your question?
Yeah.
Anything else? So, thank you for joining us this early on Saturday.